You gotta understand, the enemy's not the man, it's the mindset. Killing my people that's in a similar to COVID. No sense, how you take a life without a motive? Tired of seeing protest, dying to see progress. For the person that'll win in the end, doesn't really matter what's the color of the skin. When the bullets scatter, when they bleed from within, haven't we shed more blood than these tears?
The poet Maya Angelou, who once wrote that prejudice is a burden that confuses the past, it threatens the future, and it renders the present inaccessible. I think given the current nature of things, the way they are in the United States and the world, I thought that was a really appropriate thing to start with tonight, give us something to think about. Not only the past, the future, but also the present. So as you hear those words and you think about what it was that Ms. Angelou said, how do we use that to help unpack where we're at today?
I'm going to start. I think that's huge. And to kind of, I don't know that any words can unpack kind of where we are currently. There's like so many things going on, and I think we've all felt in so many ways or experienced just so much raw emotion on both sides of this, no matter how it is. Her words are quite fitting because sometimes when I can speak from both sides, I am a woman of color. I have dealt with both oppression and racism, but oppression isn't something that, or prejudice, I should say, isn't always just something that can be, based on me. But in dealing with that, one of the things that I would say in relative to her words is that it is often the people who oppress that memory is the gift that they have to forget, absence of memory. They want those of us who have experienced it to just forget and move along. So her words are fitting as opposed to unpacking that. I just hope that with current days that everybody feels more comfortable to open up and have these conversations and not be so quick to dismiss someone or ask us to forget those things that have brought us to the place that we are today.
Marquis?
You put the spotlight on me, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Well, when I hear those words, I mean, they're very powerful, and I think they're very, it hits on the head of what we're dealing with today as far as like, but when it comes to unpacking anything, I think it's just more like just being able to relate to your fellow brother or sister and just kind of like just hearing them out instead of like automatically passing judgment on them as far as like their appearance or something, wherever have you. I just like to be able to be and sit in environments like these and hear different perspectives on things. So I think what her words are very relevant to what we're dealing with today, especially in the times. So they're more than powerful to me.
So why is this important? I mean, obviously this is important to all of you because you're taking your time to be here. So why is this important to you?
It's important because as human beings, sir, we owe ourselves to practice allowing honesty to be the only principle so that we can move forth from this place. Because as human beings, not some of us, but all of us, we deserve better than this. And I think it has brought us to a place that we need to realize it's not what you see, the external, that makes the man, but it's what's in the man, the internal, that makes the man, the human being, if you will. So it's what's bottled up within us that makes us. So that's how I feel about it, sir.
Beth, why is this so important to you? I mean, you've devoted your life to this. Talk about why this is important to you.
Sometimes it's hard to, personalize it more. That's why here, I mean, most of us are here because we grew up in this area or from it. And I was just obsessed graduating from senior high when I did that. And now I can articulate it. It's just history matters and we don't know it. None of us really know it. And I only say that is because, I spent 25 years trying to learn the elements of history that give all of us the building blocks. So, what we now call anti-racist history is looking back at who were the white folks who who stepped outside of their place of privilege all throughout history to make a change, understanding that race is a social construction and being able to explain what that is in usable terms. I'm also, as an academic, I became an academic because I was like, so that we need to know this, not just that people, because academia has done amazing studies. There's all kinds of stuff out there, but it's not part of what we don't value it as a society, and that makes a difference. So, giving people a place to come from, not from, like, we just have this obsession where everybody goes back and they're like, depending upon what your position is, whether that history follows you, right? And it follows all of us. It's just been constructed in ways where it sort of disappears generation by generation for those who are now identified as white, who somehow don't carry the legacy. Yet we all carry this legacy, and the point is that it's these are the original sins of the country, right? Genocide and slavery, and we build a country where we call it free. So there's just fundamental contradictions that are so politicized now. But that's the challenge, is like, you got to at least start with the whole history before you can figure out how to move forward, because history is the future. It's that plan. So I just, on a personal level, I could talk about this forever, because it is the thing that I think these type of inequities, and there's a bunch of different ones and they intersect, are the things that keep us from having a truly prosperous community. And those are the goals.
I kind of want to build off of that. Everything that y'all have said so far is really wonderful and rolling around in my head a lot. So if I stammer a little bit, I'm just trying to make these connections. But you asked about kind of why we're here, why this is important to us. And in my work, just as like a poet, the selfish person in front of a page, like I care about making connections. But, between sounds, between words, between different narratives and dialogues, and so on and so forth. But as an educator, I'm also really interested in making connections as well between people, and kind of building off of what you were saying, Bruce, right? So that people can come together and see each other for who they are. And what really strikes me, especially about what Crystal said, is this kind of differential experience of memory, right? Wherein we all are burdened by this same set of original sins within this nation, right? But the experiences of that burden are enormously differential based upon the way that people perceive us, just how they see us quickly. And white people don't have to connect to that history nearly as much, right? They're the ones who are asking everybody else to forget that history. And that is a reiteration of that same sin over and over and over again. And that's not something that I think that I as an individual can stand, and it's not something that I as an educator can stand, let alone as a community member. And so I find it enormously important that we are connecting ourselves to the history as it was, not as it has been written and communicated by those who seized the power and didn't let it go. It's really great to hear you all talk about this.
And I 100% agree with it. Just to add on, I had a situation. I was in 7th grade, and there was a history teacher, and she was teaching us, and my dad's a historian, so we always had all these Black history books. There were so many things we were aware of. She's telling these stories, and I'm sitting there like, but I went to county school, so that's another thing. I was raised in Mifflin Township, so you sit in this classroom, and you're the only one of color hearing things that don't add up in any way, shape, or form. And so I said, well, can we talk about this? She's like, no, this is how it is. So I took the book to my dad. He was like, this is ridiculous. Like, this is what they're teaching. So he went and had a meeting, and his point is my daughter cannot sit through this. I refuse. Like, she will do independent studies. She's in honors English anyways. She's going to write you a report every week. She'll report back to you, but I refuse to have her sit through this. There's no way that this is something that she'll be a part of. And it's so interesting that we've continued to allow that history to take place. I'm always happy that I had a dad who did stand up, that was one of the things that we said. And history on my side is a vital component. I think it's vital to who I've become. It's something that I always shared with my children, even though they're multi-racial, but it's just because they have like a pride and an understanding of where we've come to where we're continuously going. It's so vital. And it's fabulous. Like Beth and I have become friends, but it's like a beautiful thing when you're exchanging and you love that people like embrace real truths, bring them forward. And I would love to see that happen, that connection, that exchange, that unlearning that we've somehow learned as a community within the history, so that we learn almost what he said, that it is. You said something wonderful too, where we're always looking at what's outside, but that's also a thing that's been taught. Everybody taught us to take care of the outer man while the inner man's dying, realistically. But if we all bring truths, we all bring history, I think that circle of like real human love that Beth is talking about, it's too easy to surround us when we all can understand who people are, connect with them on so many levels. And I would love to see that more, like this whole conversation thing, if it could happen more often. It's a beautiful thing.
Thank you for sharing that that experience from when you were in school. And we have almost everybody here is connected in education. So I'd like to get a little bit about, for example, Chris, tell us about some incidents or some times. What has shaped your view now that you're a principal and an educator? What impacted you going through school in terms of prejudice or racism or equality?
Well, I grew up in Crawford County, so I experienced a totally different atmosphere than in Richland County going to school. So just stepping out of my surroundings and what I knew or what I've known was huge for me. I went to Akron, I went to college, and then my first job was teaching at Oberlin High School, which is about 40% black and about 10% really liberal, then about 50% really rural. So it was a very unique environment for me, coming from Bucyrus, Ohio in the early 80s, you know. So I guess just listen to everybody talk about why they're here, and the biggest thing that I've taken away so far is the history part is huge for me, because the more I know, the more I'm more knowledgeable, the more I'm less ignorant. But I think, you know, being a leader of a high school, especially in today's climate, dealing with society issues and the lack of interaction due to the shutdown of schools, and I want to make sure, from my perspective, that I have the knowledge that I need to have as a leader in the school, but also to allow students to understand the importance of not being ignorant themselves, because I think knowledge gives you perspective, and perspective maybe changes your opinion and allows you to have tolerance for one another and things of that nature. So I think, you know, as I look through my different educational stops around Ohio, I think the biggest thing I can draw from that is gaining that perspective, or gaining that wisdom from being in different settings.
Marquis, what experiences, as you were growing up, going through school, talk about your experiences and how it shaped your views.
Okay, yeah, so I graduated from Mansfield Senior High, but I'm originally from Dayton, Ohio. When I came, well, my time through Mansfield Senior High, it was very, very diverse. So I always made a point, because I was so raised on this: do not judge a person by their appearance. So I've always been raised to just go ahead and just talk to a person, get to know that person before passing down any type of judgment. So now, as coming up through high school, I always had friends of many different backgrounds, and I made it. And I was on purpose with that, because I definitely did not want to just be stuck in just one crowd, or where somebody would look at me and automatically just maybe assume that I'm this type of person because I hang around these type of people. So I've always been diverse, and being able to have different type of friends and networking and talking to people just all throughout college as well, and all to my life to date. I wasn't really affected that much by a lot of maybe racial, or had any type of really experiences where someone was treating me unequal to someone else, because it was just so diverse in my school. But me, in a sort of an educational position now, being a basketball coach, I always like to talk to my students, my players, about the game is more than just about playing basketball. You are in a position of leadership. A lot of people look up to them as being on a basketball team, varsity basketball team or whatever, and people look at you and they automatically, you have a position of leadership, quote unquote. So I like to tell them to not stay inside this box, but also just don't be afraid to spread your wings and talk to a person that maybe somebody else is not befriending, or of another background, or even race, or something like that, because I want them to be diverse as well. And just, I need to be able to be educated on exactly where it is that we come from in the history going on in our country, so I can be in a better position to teach them. And dealing with my sons today, I want them to be able to be well equipped and well educated on exactly where it is that we are, where we were at, so they can be better leaders going forward, and also bring along some guys with them, just going towards the future. So it's just all about learning, and I'm never afraid to read a book. I pass on books to my kids and students all the time, to making sure that their minds stay open, as far as where we're at in our world today. So that's exactly where I'm at.
And Bruce, reflect on what Marquis was just saying, and contrast that or compare that to your experiences.
Certainly, I can reflect out of what Marquis was sharing. My experience total the opposite of his. Again, Bruce Bond, born to Pearline Bond Curry. My mother was a single parent. I was born March 2nd, 1963, in the state of Tennessee. I was the first child out of 7 children that entered into an integrated school. Schools were segregated before I started the school. So starting to a school, being the first child in my family, going to a school that was integrated, it was very tough. I faced racism, head on. I can recall getting on the bus, being called, that N word. I can recall getting on the bus, very frightened, very, very fearful, for my life, and really very fearful for what my older siblings, had to endure and go through, getting on that bus, because it was a little bit more tougher on them than it was for me. But to make a long story short, of course, I became very, very bitter. But I can recall they separated all of the children on the playground and in the classroom. The first graders, the white children played on one end of the playground, and the black children played on the other end of the playground. So as the years went on, the younger children in the school naturally was gravitating towards one another. It was nothing that they could do. It was nothing that the educators could do to prevent us from having that moment, our hour of power, that we all came together and played on one playground. I mean, it just happened. You can't teach kids, all kids, you can't teach all kids, to just be hate mongers, because certainly if that was the effort, back when I started the school, it didn't work. From the first grade, and I left Tennessee when I was in the 4th grade, but from the time I was in the 1st grade and when I became in the 4th grade, there was no desegregated playground like the educators thought it would be. The 1st grade students that started in the 1st grade, we found a way to come together on the playground. And before I left Tennessee, they integrated us in the classroom together.
What part of Tennessee were you from?
Haywood County, Brownsville, Tennessee.
Okay. The reason I asked, my mother was from a town outside Memphis called Millington. And I'm 2 years older than you, but I grew up in South Georgia, so some of the experiences you're talking about really kind of resonated with me. So thank you.
I was raised on a very large cotton plantation. My grandfather, of course, was a sharecropper. I mean, and we faced it all.
My mother used to tell me, and my uncle and my aunt would correct her, that her family picked cotton, and she used to talk about how hard she worked. And my uncle would look at her and say, "Blue Eyes, you just rode on the bag. I just pulled you along the road. You rode on the bag. You didn't pick anything." So I thank you for sharing that. That's good. Beth, what about your experiences? What kind of shaped you into, you said you were obsessed with this. I mean, what shaped you to want? Tell me about some experiences you had growing up here.
Yeah, it's, I mean, as you notice, like it takes a while, like educators have a hard time just talking, right? That's what, so it's like going between the spaces, and like, I already want to ask you more questions about your experience, because it's, this is how the sausage gets made. This is actual history rather than the curriculum that we have now, which we should burn. It's just the number one thing that's holding us back. But here, I mean, it had to do with journalism too. I caused some sort of a race riot in Mansfield City Schools when I was a senior, trying to talk about race. But I have a lot of different images. I was just thinking about being really very young, like 6 years old, when my dad was a coach, track coach in particular. I remember that. And he used to, Doug Castle, who passed away in 2018, but he was a principal and he was a track coach. And we'd be in a car. Basically, I just remember being 6 years old, and I came up to about everybody's like maybe knee or mid thigh, and all I ever saw were just like black track legs, like strong track legs, and they'd carrying, because the team was entirely black, and I didn't have any words for it at the time, but I was in charge of the baton, which was really important because it was all relay teams. But just the earliest memories of Ben Gay was used for getting rid of ash, like stuff that just, I was like, ouch, watch where you put it. But it was still just very early images. And then I just think later it was about, and my dad was the assistant principal at John Sherman at a time that it was just open, interactive racism, like bald face, in your face, not microaggressions or this more subtle stuff, but just old school. That's making a wonderful resurgence in our country now. At the same time that we have all these microaggressions, but anyway, I just remember his principal was a dark-skinned black man, Murphy Moultrie, and they worked they hadn't seen a team like that before, and Dad handled the discipline for all of the young black students, and he handled the discipline for the white Appalachian students. And before he died, we were just, because I was asking him all kinds of questions, like how did this play out? What were the issues? And it was just it's a powerful thing, and I think that's the challenge now is that we're trying to, we're intellectualizing a lot of stuff, but I think that's the thing I remember most about being here and then growing up, because I had this little diary and I was reading it, and I was 12 years old, and I was like, I love this phrase that I was, Mansfield is the microcosm of all American social ills. I don't know what I thought that meant at the time, but I was obsessed with it because I was just like, I couldn't find the language to say the things I needed to say about these things that I now know are systemic, right? And how, like, Marquis, what you were talking about too, where it's like, it's so hard, like, we can be good human beings in our physical selves, like at school or doing these things, but just the systems where like people got tracked. And I remember trying to say why there was one young black woman who was in a class of mine. She was the only black woman in the class, and I tried to say something that had to do like that, why she was the only one. And I was just like, you can see, you're all like, oh, she's gonna say it, like just the idea of like, and I was just trying to talk about like, this isn't right, but trying to talk about it just went really wrong. And everybody freaked out, and the teacher, and this is the thing, the teacher wasn't capable of handling that moment at all. And to me, that's part of what I really want to do more of, is this, like, whether we call it bias training. I want to teach teachers, and I want to work with teachers to have a greater comfort and capacity. It's their job to do better. And that's where we do the disservice, where we have towns where like, we don't have any race problems. I'm like, no, the nice part is you do. And let's talk about it, and let's help you figure it out. So that's some of the work that white folks can do, but yeah, so there's a lot of things, and I'm thinking more about it so that I can not always be people are like, educators, we've had enough of you. Quit telling us about things. Tell us about it from the heart.
And I think, because Chris said it, the sooner we get comfortable with this conversation, the better it's going to be for all of us. The minute that we get comfortable enough to just say racism and people don't cringe, or especially like all of our white counterparts, it's like, don't cringe. We're not calling you a racist. We're saying that it exists. And so sometimes that's what I say, that like, I'm a product of racism and discrimination, like, have at it. Let's have this conversation. But the other thing about it is what you said about educators. I just think that all of us, like Marquis said, are educators. But as educators, and when we take these positions of leadership, I almost think that we should all write a mission statement, like somewhere in our mind. Like, what is that? And I always say mine is to teach and learn in every interaction. I don't care who you are. I'm hoping that I gained something by the time that we leave, and I hope that you gathered something for me. And you can learn from a 4-year-old if you want to, and sometimes it's nothing more than to just see life in the blissful way that they do and stop taking life so seriously. You can learn from a racist. You can learn what not to be, how not to respond. But I think if we all set some form of a mission statement, like in our minds, in our souls, and especially as educators, like my goal is to teach and learn in every interaction. Like, I'm going to slow down, because perspective is this amazing throne that we all sit on. It's that piece is very different.
Well, nothing can transpire and really happen until one can speak from the soul and get honest, with the soul, and allow honesty to be the only policy that is permeating, from the soul. It's okay to be able to share with anyone that of which I really feel, in my soul, opposed to lying about it. And I think, what has transpired, you have a whole lot of people, in this country and in this world, from all aspects of life, even in our religious bodies, even in our churches, have become contaminated with people that sits in key places. They are guilty, of telling a lie to themselves and to others. And so, I think we're in a wonderful place that if we can get honest and allow honesty to be our only principle, we're well on our way to beginning a great work and getting the work done.